Hi, this will be a film on the relationship between the hand and the arm whilst playing legato on the piano. Basically how they best connect up together for the simplest results. Now, the most common term we hear is weight transfer. I don't necessarily mind this personally, but I feel it's extremely important to give enough clarifications to ensure that we don't just end up piling the weight of the arm on the hand, becoming heavy, and we don't try and do the hand's job for it with the arm, but we give a very clear assignment of their roles that are going to mix together. Now, the more extreme version of this, however, I certainly do have a problem with the very extreme explanations. If they work for you, then just carry on doing it. But we hear some explanations which are certainly not factually true. The idea that the arm basically sends free energy through the hand. All the hand has to do is be a passive transmitter of the arm energy. Supposedly free energy from gravity, all these kind of very extreme versions, that it's supposed to take work off the fingers by using more arm. All kinds of things which cannot stand up to any scrutiny. I'm going to go through why these are factually untrue and show how we don't have to do major tweaks, we just have to make a few little tweaks and then we can make sense of it in a perfectly credible fashion without having to go into all these kind of fantasies that aren't true. Anyway, so I'll just play a minute or so of an arrangement of Mahler's 10th Symphony by Ian Farrington. We'll also talk about simple things, just going up and down the fingers. But first, this is a demonstration in a cantabile context. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on there. Now, the most common problem, possibly amongst beginners particularly, would be trying to hold the arm very still and kind of poking the fingers into the keys as if the arm is just rigid, which is self-defeating because the fingers can't move freely. Particularly if you're held up, this would be very clearly a problem. But the weight approach, initially it's a very good way to get around that. If you drop onto each finger in a very extreme form like this, of course, you're going to start creating some form of connection between the hand and the arm. Now, the problem is if we literally do try and use the arm to provide the energy without finger movements, that could look, say, something like this. The problem is that you can't do anything smoothly when the weight of the arm is moving the keys for you. So basically, this is what it should look like again if I show you this kind of thing. There's fluidity, the arm is drifting, and while that's taking place, the fingers are taking the keys. Now, maybe for some people, if they concentrate on this smooth arm movement, maybe they have instincts in the fingers that makes them want to do this. But I know for myself, I never had those instincts. So if I try to use a kind of long, ongoing arm pressure, it would just jam up essentially. It wouldn't be effective. So essentially, the true role of the arm is to concentrate on moving smoothly sideways. It's actually the fingers taking the keys first and foremost. And because the arm is doing this, that's going to stop the fingers jamming up and getting stuck. In fact, the only way a finger can truly jam is if the weight of the arm is bearing down on it, or if the arm is rigid. So really, I mean, I don't want to go too over the top here and say it's impossible for a finger to work for itself. But it's not far off the case. It's almost always what the arm is doing that messes it up when we say finger isolation, all these kind of things. So if I hold the arm rigid and I try and move nothing but the fingers, The problem is that the arm can't properly respond to that. Now if I rest the weight of the arm on those fingers, the arm is starting to respond to what the fingers are doing. That's getting a lot better. But the real version, remember, is the fingers taking the keys and the arm drifting, which is not a series of pressures caused by weight. It's actually taking you away from the weight. So if you put a finger down and then drift the arm sideways, what you should notice is that if the finger wasn't engaging, the arm would just take that finger away almost immediately. It's going to be gone. So what's really happening when we go sideways around a finger is the weight of the arm is being carried away from that finger. The finger itself is poking out and keeping that key down. And in this scenario, honestly, it's almost impossible for that finger to overwork unless you're sort of doing both things at the same time. The mistake might be you're still trying to bear into this one as you move sideways. It's not about doing both at the same time. It's very much taking the weight elsewhere, getting it away from that finger, keep the finger poking out, and you've got that key securely grounded. And that's how we can blend things together for legato. We're always taking the weight elsewhere, which frees the fingers to take the keys with confidence. Now, again, if you're too stiff, that doesn't work. So there will be many people that have to use the weight approach for a certain amount of time once their arms are freed up. What you should understand is you don't want to get stuck in the weight idea. You just want to have enough connection created by the finger that the arm has something to be connected to. It's not the arm trying to rest into that. It's the arm accepting and responding, so it molds itself around fingers which take the keys. And that's how we get real precision in the sound. If the arm plops on each one, it's very hard to get any precision in the sound. So true legato is fingers producing sound, not the arm giving the energy. The arm is in this kind of organisational role, doing all these other things, but not trying to be the primary transmitter of energy. Now, occasionally, yeah, you can drop the arm on a finger, certainly, but remember, it doesn't work for every note. You can't be doing that kind of thing constantly and have fine control. If you want the context in the sound, it's the stroking of the fingers, which is by far the most effective. Now, let's just go into an analogy for this. Walking is very often used as an explanation. And, okay, if we are talking about walking, imagine if these fingers are the legs at the moment, say. Now, if I was walking along, of course, I'd be transferring weight from leg to leg. There's no way in that context that you can do that without transferring weight. But let's go a little bit deeper into what happens when we're walking, rather than just say, okay, we put weight on the legs. Because we often say that on the piano, put the weight into the fingers, make sure they have the weight on them. And then again, we're stuck in these juddering movements, one by one. Now, walking itself can actually go wrong, even though we have no control over how much weight is involved. If you think, put the weight onto your leg, you may actually stamp down too hard. So the reality of what makes walking work is that the foot touches the ground gently, the foot presses down, but the trick is it's action and reaction. The action is downwards, the foot presses down. The reaction elevates, and it's that elevation that the weight is supported by. So if we do want to think of weight transfer, this is such an important thing to understand. We're not transferring downward pressures and jamming into them. If we want to do that, when you're walking, the main thing is the weight is travelling forwards, proceeding along. And if you're walking well, you'll never be thinking of trying to put weight down. It's just the feet that push down. And if they do their job well, if they connect with the ground smoothly and nicely, all you feel is that smooth carriage forwards, not the downward feeling. So we're generating up forces, and that stabilises the weight. So it's very much the same thing when we're doing legato on the piano. The finger takes the point of connection. We don't stop for that connection. We've got to keep the weight travelling elsewhere. The weight is going to be travelling sideways while we create points of connection. And we just allow the arm to receive some support from those while it's concerned with doing this other thing. So again, we don't want to get caught in these kind of downward ideas. The big thing about gravity is if you want to free yourself, you have to actually oppose it in an effective manner. If you just keep thinking, okay, go with it, go into the weight. As I say, that's one way to get free initially. That will free the arm up to start with. But it's not how we play if we want to get effective results. We've got to keep stabilising it through fingers that lead. The finger takes the connection. The arm just accepts it and molds itself around that. It doesn't have to try and be heavy. And if you get that really good, honestly, you can be incredibly light. It's very easy to do that kind of thing. When we realise, yeah, this plays a role in helping the arm to be supported, but it doesn't play that role because the arm bears on it. It plays that role because it wants to, it leads. The finger takes connection. The arm is helped by this. So essentially, the main way to explain this, rationally speaking, is that the arm is chiefly not an accelerator, at least in a legato context. Again, if you're playing big chords, yeah, we can use the arm, get a bit of a run up, and the arm is very much an accelerator in some scenarios. If we're playing legato, the arm is actually an absorber. It's not leading anything, it's not putting through the fingers trying to do their job for them. The arm is just accepting what comes back. So a finger moves a key or touches down, move the key, something comes back up the arm. And in fact, I've heard, there was a video I watched very recently. There was a guy saying that if everything feels very jammed, he was blaming it on the fingers. And he was actually saying, yeah, you should be using more arm weight and that will solve the problem. And unfortunately, his explanation was 100% back to front, I'm afraid. The only way a finger can jam is if you put too much weight into the finger or if the arm blocks it from moving. So basically, rigid arm, that's going to jam because the arm is stuck. A weighted arm, weighing into the hand, this crushes the hand. The finger is what gets overworked. So basically, to prove this, if you think how much a finger weighs, imagine if you took an insect, say, something really light indeed, put an insect on the piano key. There's no way for that insect to put enough force into the key to even move it, because if it pushes as hard as it can, it just gets knocked away, gets sent up in the air. Now, the weight of a finger, I'm not absolutely sure. I don't recommend cutting off one of your digits and putting it on a piano key to check. But I don't know, it might be just about enough to put a piano key down if you had a dismembered finger. And it's the same as the insect. If that finger could somehow engage without the arm, it would probably get knocked away from the piano key before it had any chance of applying a large force to that key. So it's literally physically impossible. A finger does not have enough mass to jam itself into a piano key. It's completely 100% impossible. The only thing that can happen is that there's mass bearing down on it from behind, and that's what can make a finger jam. Now, a really good way of checking into this is if you move a piano key firstly staccato, start with the finger on the key. There's two ways of doing this. One is to sweep backwards. Start with the arm very light. Any weight we have is not enough to even move the key. We'll rest into it a little bit, but it's very, very slight. And then the arm should respond easily. So that's what I'm saying, that the finger's not jammed there because it simply doesn't have enough mass. If it does jam, that's because the arm has been resting into it, and that's what stops it being repelled. So it's very important to learn this distinction. If you swipe the finger back, let the arm respond. Also, you can do it by a kind of extension of the finger. Start with the finger a bit kind of crumpled up and knock yourself away by lengthening the finger. Either way, we need to be able to respond to that by lightening the arm. Then what we do with the arm, it's not playing through heaviness. What we're doing is just kind of accepting the response and absorbing that response. So this time, if I do the same thing, but I stay in the key, that's because my arm wasn't lightened as much. I wasn't weighing to produce the sound. I was just making sure that the arm does enough to cancel that partially. But do you see there, my hand is standing up still. Again, a finger cannot overwork unless you stop it from standing up using your arm. So if it looks like this, that's what it looks like to jam a finger. We call it key bedding sometimes. I spoke about this in my previous video in the context of chords. Same sort of thing here. If that finger jams, whether it jams static and still basically stands up, there's too much arm pressure, still not good, or whether it's crushed under the arm pressure, or even if everything piles in like that. The only thing that can jam that finger is the mass of the arm, the mass of the body. If you just let the finger do what it wants to do and you get out of its way, the finger simply stands up. You become taller. You haven't overworked. You've used the key bed to stand the finger up better and you're more connected. And fundamentally, these finger actions need the freedom to work really well. If you want a good legato, you have to make enough space for these. So I'm really grabbing the keys when I do this. Grabbing them slowly, not grabbing them with jerky movements, of course. I have to move them slowly with intention. And because my arm is not weighing into these, I'm carrying the weight of the arm from side to side. instead of actively bearing it down. These responses are allowed. So that gives my arm something to join to. But the arm is not heavy, because if it was, those fingers couldn't do their job properly. If the fingers felt jammed, it's kind of stuck. That's all on the arm. That's not on the fingers. Get the arm doing something else. It's almost like you're distracting the arm, basically. I mean, there's two ways you can look at this. One is to say, yeah, the arm guides through the fingers. It's a very nice feeling. When we're travelling towards two more fingers, the arm goes slowly in that direction. But another way to look at it, in a way, we're just basically distracting the arm so it can't keep doing this. So it's both roles simultaneously. One of them is to guide you through the notes, and the other one, it's almost just been moving for the sake of it anyway, just to make sure your arm can't keep jamming into those fingers and messing everything up for them. We want those fingers to be able to move. We don't want to keep jamming into them. So give the arm something else to do. Get it occupied with this kind of stuff, and then we have a much nicer time. Anyway, so I hope that explains a lot about this true connection between hand and arm. And I hope you can understand, yeah, weight transfer sort of makes sense because we have points of contact. But I hope that clarifies why some of these explanations are simply not accurate. We have to understand this difference for the easiest time between the arm as an energy source versus the arm as this nice kind of free thing that drifts around behind our playing. That's not the same thing as an energy source which piles in. Oh, sorry, just before I finish quickly, a good analogy for this, by the way. Going back to the walking thing, nobody would ever say, well, you're walking forwards. Okay, our feet, as we said, they're supporting the weight, but nobody would ever say in that scenario that the legs are getting free energy because you're supporting the weight of your torso. You'd be absolutely crazy to think that way. Wouldn't make the slightest bit of sense. It's exactly the same thing in this legato walking on the piano. When I'm doing this, the fingers are doing the work and moving the keys, and that's very easy. We don't need to pretend the hand is doing it. Just recognise how easy it is when we get the right relationship. And that explains everything. We don't need this ridiculous idea that these fingers are somehow driven by free arm energy. So picture it this way. Imagine if you got on a step machine, it's quite a good example of this. A bit like moving the keys on the piano. If we say a trill, you're moving your legs on a step machine. So if that's supposedly free energy on the piano, based on gravity, the same principle would also apply on a step machine. Get on a step machine, strap on a massive backpack full of bricks, and start walking with that free energy. Spend 20 minutes on there and see whether you start sweating or not from all that supposed free energy that you're getting. It's not true in the slightest. It's just complete fantasy. So if you recognise that the fingers are what are doing the work, that the legs are what are doing the work when we're walking, and that mass is stabilised by that, and that has nothing to do with providing energy, we have so much of an easier time with that accurate picture than this constant pretense that the arm is doing things that are simply impossible.